Hello and welcome to episode 92 of Radio Gorepress. I am your intrepid host today, Phil. Joining me as always is my lovely co-host Sarah. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm not feeling very lovely this week. Not that I ever do particularly. So. Oh, you. Yeah, I don't know. Life is weird currently. Lots of ups and downs.
Yep.
But getting through it, which is the main thing.
That's the important thing. That is very much the important thing.
How are you doing, Phil?
Yeah, good. Just sleepy. I am currently in the middle of trying to go freelance, so I'm frantically polishing up all my show reel and stuff. So it's been busy, as well as being a mostly full-time dad, and everything is going on. I
have heard babies are quite time consuming. Is she a baby anymore?
She's a toddler. She can walk.
Oh my God. What?
She runs. Sorry. I took her for a walk today and she kept wanting to run out into the road.
Good Lord.
No, not happening.
Fucking hell. Keep an eye on that.
Yep.
Right, question. Mm-hmm. At what point officially do they stop being babies and start being toddlers?
I mean, I've assumed it's when they can toddle around on their feet.
Is that literally it?
That's what I've assumed.
The clue is in the name. Nice one, yep. Sarah. I could have maybe reached that conclusion myself if I'd thought about it for more than 5 seconds. Cool.
It's all right. I mean, it's become just a word. It's almost meaningless. It's like a toddler is someone who is roughly this age. You don't really think about the etymology of it, do you?
This high.
Exactly. But no, yeah, I've just taken it to mean that when she can walk, she's a toddler.
When do they become teacup humans?
Pretty much.
Okay.
It's very sweet.
We'll figure it out.
So we are, again, without Rosie today. She's currently, again, having computer troubles, but with any luck, she'll be back next episode. So keep your ears out for that.
We make it sound like she lives in some sort of cabin in the woods without reliable Wi-Fi.
I'd be jealous.
Working
Can you imagine?
No, would you want to be in our cabin in the woods or the cabin in the woods?
The cabin in the woods.
Yeah, exactly.
A cabin in the woods, I think.
All right. I'm just going to go off on as many tangents as possible to avoid talking about this film, by the way. Second question. In Cabin in the Woods, which of the artifacts would you have chosen?
Oh, God. There's a question. See, why don't we just cover that show? Cover that film.
I'm sure we will eventually.
I think... I think there was... See, now I can't actually remember any of the artifacts. It's really bugging me.
All right. If you can't remember the artifact, then name the monster that it would be attached to, yeah.
Okay.
For me, it would probably be the Cenobite one.
Yeah. He was... don't get me started. I'm just... That film, I love it so much.
Should we just cover Cabin in the Woods?
I mean, you will have no objections from me.
I would rather talk about that one.
Always game. But Cabin in the Woods. Okay, well, I feel like we need to just get over it and talk about the film we're doing.
I guess.
We've chosen, in the interests of staying spooky for spooky season.
Many spoops.
Many spoops indeed. We've chosen to cover Hell House LLC this week. Just see just expression of just blank just falling over Sarah's face.
The room.
It's going to be an interesting one, guys.
In here. Yeah.
So it's. I think it's perhaps one of the first, if not the first, found footage movies we've covered. I was trying to work out if you've done anything more.
We did Adam Wingard's Blair Witch, but that's not strictly found footage, is it? It's kind of it's a sequel to a found footage film that utilises found footage, but I think...
It was a bit of an odd one, wasn't it? They kind of chopped and changed between it.
But I literally can't think of any others. I wonder why. It's almost as if I've been actively avoiding them this whole time.
You can only run away for so long.
This is true.
Okay, so what are your feelings generally on found footage movies?
My reaction thus far, not giving it away.
I was about to say, if that wasn't enough to give it away.
My feelings about found footage movies. Do you know what? I own a handful. I like a handful.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it's done really well, it can be a really effective medium by which to tell a horror story.
Mm-hmm.
I think my issue is that they are so rarely done well.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting. I mean, that is true, but I think that's perhaps.
I mean, that's true.
Less
It's true
to
of the
do
whole
with,
genre. Let's be honest. To
yeah,
some degree.
Oh, very true. But I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower for found footage movies because there's a assumption that it's kind of one of those things where, you know how like when you hear actors singing badly or like singers singing badly, the idea that you have to be a good singer in order to sing badly. The idea being that you have to be knowledgeable about whatever genre or platform you're working with in order to subvert the kind of expectations and do things badly. Because there's badly done badly and good done badly, you know?
I know what you're saying. I'm struggling with the metaphor because I can definitely sing badly with absolutely zero effort on my part.
I mean, perhaps it was a bad example, but you know what I mean? Like there's bad things that are bad because they're bad, but then bad things that are on my head.
The word
what I mean?
Bad has lost all meaning.
I know, it's awful.
I do know what you mean. I do know what you mean. And I completely agree about the whole, the low barrier to entry. Literally anybody with a phone has the capability to make a found footage. The question is, should they?
Yes. Well, and this is what I'm saying. But then it takes an actual proper filmmaker or someone who is familiar with the genre to be able to utilize that kind of low tech technology well to actually create something that's worth watching.
So in terms of found footage, I think the first one is generally credited as Cannibal Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
But the first one that enjoyed any mainstream success was the Blair Witch Project. So how do you feel about the Blair Witch Project?
I loved it. I mean, I was, and don't hate me for this, a bit too young to get caught up in the hype because obviously they did a whole bunch of like kind of the outside meta marketing.
The marketing was a huge, like, I enjoy the film. I see, unlike you, I was at the prime age for it. I think I was 16. I went to see it in the cinema. I've talked about my experience leaving the cinema in darkness and having to walk through the woods to go and get picked up by my friend's mum, which was perhaps one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. So I bought into the hype fully. And I think the marketing is 50% of why I think the film itself is so good. If it hadn't been, it arrived at such a sweet spot and they did what they did to advertise it so fucking well. And I think if it had been any other film at any other time, there was definitely an element of luck.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah. Well, you're right that they arrived at a point in which the internet was becoming really mainstream and really widespread, but not late enough that people start cracking down on kind of truth, essentially. You know, for example, on IMDb, it listing all the actors as deceased.
Yeah, that's easily verifiable now.
Right, exactly. Like, there's so many, the internet is so ubiquitous and it's so easy to find information that I don't think anything like that would work these days.
No, I think you're right. I think that was probably the last great example of that type of marketing because you can't do it now. You just can't. And I remember hearing about it at the time and just, but it got people talking. It sort of tapped into this kind of primal fear, and I don't know. The marketing was genius, and I don't know who was responsible for that. Whether it was the distribution company, whether it was the filmmakers themselves. But whoever did it brilliantly. And I think without that, I would find the film itself far less impressive. I think it was still done well. Yeah. But I think a large part of it was that I was at the perfect age to experience it as a whole.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think obviously Cannibal Holocaust was more of a mockumentary, wasn't it? If memory serves, it was like a camera crew visiting a location and filming the locals, as it were.
Is there a term for like a fake documentary that's not a comedy? Because I always associate the word mockumentary with like Spinal Tap, like a comedy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The Office.
And
yeah.
when I hear mockumentary, I'm just like, have you seen Cannibal Holocaust? It's not funny.
I mean, I know exactly what you mean, but I've always taken it to mean a fake documentary.
I think,
or a fictional
I think
documentary.
we should create a new term for like a serious mockumentary. Write in with your answers and your suggestions, please. Answers on a postcard too. Philip at 10 Radio Gorepress Avenue. Just yeet it out the front door and hope for the best.
That wasn't a legitimate email address.
No, that was an address. A postal address. We going old school.
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
see, all this talk of the internet.
Spoiler alert, it also wasn't a real address.
Yeah, it's a weird one though, Blair Witch, because like it exemplifies a lot of the tropes that actually put people off found footage these days. Like there's a lot of shaky cam,
annoying characters,
which is a massive turnoff. Yeah, annoying characters. I mean, obviously, it was an interesting one because with that particular one, they, as I'm sure you all know, they had less of a script and more told their actors to be in a situation and then effectively were just terrorized by the crew
like
throughout the night.
At night, being circled by people making weird noises and stuff. Jesus Christ, I can't imagine that. But then,
so I can fully understand why those characters would be stressed, because obviously the actors are going through kind of sleep deprivation and stuff as well, presumably. So of course they're going to be tetchy and aggravated.
Who's your least favourite character in Blair Witch?
Oh, see, I only really remember Heather.
If your answer isn't Mike, because he kicked the fucking map into the river, then you're wrong.
Yeah, I was about to say, was he the one that just kicked the map? What a dick. I know. If you're going to get lost in the woods, you keep the map.
What a knob. I mean, you know, interestingly, and I won't labour this for very long because we are obviously not covering the Blair Witch Project this episode, but there's a conspiracy theory that actually the whole thing was orchestrated by Heather.
Huh.
And
interesting.
There are videos on YouTube that posit that theory. I think one of them might actually be the Film Theorist channel.
Okay.
And it's really interesting, really interesting. There's a lot of merit to that theory. So I kind of want to rewatch it with that in mind.
Yeah, that's really neat. But yeah, so in case you hadn't realised, I am quite a fan of found footage. I think there is a certain unpredictability that they tend to have at least, that makes them a lot more difficult to kind of second guess.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. I think found footage certainly has become such a massive subgenre in its own right that you can sort of predict some of the tropes and the beats that they hit, and you can start to predict some of the jump scares. And I know what you mean, but you see the same things over and over again. To me, at least. I think basically what I'm saying, coming off the back of episode 91, is that found footage films to me are what slashers are to you.
Well, at least we're in agreement with something.
We're in agreement about our disagreement.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so without further ado, let's just jump in and talk about Hell House LLC.
Let's have more ado. I want more ado.
with much ado.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a synopsis, Sarah?
Oh, go on then. So, the film, shot as a documentary, follows a group of Halloween haunted house creators as they prepare for the 2009 opening of their popular haunted attraction, Hell House. Tragedy strikes on opening night when an unknown malfunction causes the death of 15 tourgoers and staff. The film reveals the lead up to the tragedy and documenting what exactly went wrong that night, which has been a mystery to the public.
Ooh. So,
There you go.
it's a mockumentary.
Yeah, of a fashion.
I think that was a good way to do it, to handle the situation.
I agree.
Obviously, the part of the ridiculous thing that some fan footage can sort of fall prey to is legitimizing why that the characters are recording everything. You've got some where it's just they just have like the most flimsy of excuses.
All right, so I'm going to disagree with you straight off the bat here.
Okay.
I think what you're saying is right, technically speaking, but I don't know if I would call it a mockumentary.
Okay.
Just because there is a point at which one of the outsiders kind of says, why are you recording everything? And he has just this flimsy excuse of like, oh, I don't know, it's just like for us, like maybe the website or just, and I think they could have lent into it a little bit more and just said, we are making a documentary.
Okay.
But because he sort of had a bit of a flimsy, oh, I don't know, we're just doing it like for some behind the scenes stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that in itself is a total inception, because obviously it's a documentary featuring footage from another documentary.
Yes.
I mean, I can see the logic behind them doing it, but I think that lends itself to just like a massive head fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the whole thing is bookended from these two investigators, two reporters who are trying to work out what happened.
Awful. I hate that journalist. The female journalist can get in the bin. I hated her.
Fortunately, she doesn't have much airtime.
No. I will just point out first one of many characters that I disliked. Get used to hearing that.
Okay. But no, I think because obviously you've kind of got two different ways of interpreting found footage movies, or a couple of different at least. There's one where it's like, oh, we found this footage, we've edited it together to make narrative sense. Here it is. Then there's, and that tends to be quite bare bones. Obviously you can have music and stuff, but the idea is that it's very bare bones.
Yeah.
Then with something like this, where it's framed around a documentary, it allows for a little more creative control over the flow of the movie. And this is one of the reasons I enjoyed it, because it opens with a outsider's perspective on what happened that night.
Yeah.
Doesn't give anything away, but you get a sense of there being something very terrifying going on.
Yeah.
And then it draws back and suddenly you kind of are piecing the puzzle together as it goes on.
Yeah. And
that's one of the things I really enjoyed about it.
Okay. I think I quite like that as well, actually. I think journalist aside, the main reason I didn't like her is that I didn't think she was particularly good in the role. I just didn't think her acting was good enough. But I did like the documentary introduction with all the talking heads and people who were there who were kind of being interviewed very far down the line, kind of experts on the town and the Abaddon Hotel, is it? The Abaddon Hotel? The place where they kind of set up the haunted attraction. I like that. I think it added a richness to the story that wouldn't otherwise be there in most found footage movies.
Definitely. I think it kind of it's enough to, as much as I would have liked to have seen that interspersed a bit more throughout, because it adds to the idea of it being a documentary rather than just a found footage thing.
Yeah.
It does. I think they've balanced it really well in that they've not given too much information about the history and the lore behind the hotel, but they've given you just enough to be able to understand that there's perhaps something sinister at work.
Yeah.
And that happens fairly early on.
I find that quite interesting, actually, because if a lot of real documentaries kind of show their hand in the opening frames and then will kind of fill in gaps further on. Or they presume you already know a little bit about the subject and they just expand on it. Whereas this sort of has to serve as a documentary, but also as a movie. So actually it's sort of, oh, fuck off, you're making me like it more. I was going to say, like, it does a pretty good job of fulfilling both of those roles, because it does a pretty good job of mocking up a documentary, but also it is quite a precarious balancing act, because they can't give too much away because it would rob the film of any scares or tension. So they have to give you just enough that it still works as a documentary, but doesn't give anything away. And actually, in hindsight, yes, they've done that very well. God damn you.
I was going to apologise, but no, I have no remorse there. My whole goal throughout this entire episode is to gradually change your mind. It isn't, but it'd be good if that happens. So yeah, it's authentic. It's really authentic. The way it's shot, it feels like a documentary. But I think, and this is perhaps why I didn't really pay much attention to Diane, the female investigator, the reporter, because it was bookended almost by the actual like present day documentarian footage, but for the most part, through its like hour and a half runtime, you know, that's maybe, you know, hour and a quarter of the film is taken up entirely by what's going on within the crew who are then doing up this hotel. Yeah.
And actually, I think, again, sort of lends it a bit of credence, because you wouldn't necessarily see the journalist. I mean, how often do you watch a documentary and see the journalist in front of the camera?
Yeah.
Apart from like maybe Louis Theroux, people like that. It's generally rare.
Yeah. Exactly. Unless it's an actual like name that's meant to draw people in.
Yeah.
Predominantly, you kind of a documentarian's role is to present the facts without kind of judgment or
largely without bias. Which is bullshit, because every documentary is biased.
Of course.
By their very nature.
So on that note, what did you think of the main four characters?
Who are the main four?
There's Sarah.
I didn't like Sarah.
Paul, Alex, and Mac. I think there were four. Is there a fifth one?
There's a fifth one. There's four men and one Sarah.
Okay. So there's five. What did you think of the four? Apparently one of them is forgettable enough for me not to think about him.
Two of them look reasonably similar, so maybe that's why. Just four basic white dudes. They all look a bit interchangeable. Sorry, that's offensive. So I didn't like Sarah for two reasons. Okay. Firstly, I don't like hearing my own name repeated when I'm watching any movie. Freaks me out.
That doesn't count.
It doesn't count. It does count. That's perfectly valid. What's your problem? And secondly, one of the first scenes that she's in, she makes it really obvious that she clearly hasn't seen Escape from New York. So that's a massive...
I did note down Kurt Russell. I was like, I wonder if Sarah will get a kick out of that.
I mean, I didn't, because it just made me annoyed that she clearly hadn't seen the film. So fuck her. I don't know.
I think that's understandable.
Honestly, I didn't mind her character, but I think she was a little bit bland. But I think maybe some of that was intentional.
I mean, she's meant to be kind of the gateway into the events, because she's spoiler alert, she's the survivor of the events, and she's the one that approaches Diane and kind of gets them access to the tapes they shot. I
mean, firstly, I don't think that's kind of a spoiler, because you find out fairly early on that she survives. Secondly, we are going to spoil the ever-loving crap out of this movie, so strap in. The rest of them, one of them was called Paul.
Yes.
So
Paul was the cameraman.
I'm going to call them Paul 1, 2, 3, and 4. Paul 1, the cameraman, loathsome, hated him.
Yes.
And I think,
so
I'm guessing you were supposed to.
Which is interesting. So I went into this movie with the express intention of seeing what this film does better than other found footage movies. Okay. And whilst I was watching it, I was like, actually, it kind of falls prey to a lot of the tropes that others do as well.
In terms of the characterization, I think so, yeah.
Well, not just that, but yeah, you have kind of this group of friends, and there's a bit of banter, and there's one who is always a dick, and I don't see the reason for that.
Because in every friendship group, one person is a dick. And if you don't know who it is, spoiler alert, it's you.
Oh, I was just about to ask who's the dick in our friendship group then, no. But apparently I don't need to.
It's definitely me. 100% it's me.
But no, it's interesting. I didn't like Paul, no. And it was surprising that a film that has such a good, because it has quite a good reputation amongst critics and such.
Surprisingly so.
It's surprising that you'd have a character that is such a cliche and such a detestable person.
I mean, I think it's interesting that the core group of people who are far more invested in this endeavour are reasonably likeable. And then there's the two kind of on the outskirts who came on board for previous Halloween attractions, and that's their only link. Like the main guy, obviously, a couple of friends from way back, his girlfriend that they've been together for years. They have a very strong bond. And then you've got the other two who are almost kind of outsiders. They've only known him for a couple of years, and they've worked together at one, presumably just seasonally as well. So I'm guessing that played into it, assuming there was any real thought behind it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he hit all of the benchmarks. He was misogynistic, sexist, a bit lecherous, just not a nice person.
Flat out called a bit rapey at one point, I think.
He literally doesn't seem to give a crap about anybody. He's always just oh, what's she banging on about now? It's like, no, legitimate concerns, dude. Spooky things are happening. So I can only assume that was completely intentional.
It must be, because they clearly can write likable characters. There's a few different scenes in which I really enjoy their relationship, and you do get a sense that there's history between them, as much as there's no exploration or very little exploration into their life outside the events of the movie. Yeah. You get a sense there's history and there's actual bonds between them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, and so consequently, there is a conscious decision to have Paul be really lechy, and I don't know why.
It doesn't serve the film in any way.
Other than he's a cameraman, therefore voyeuristic, but that's a really tenuous, dumb link.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And completely untrue.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I would be interested to know, actually, how much of it was scripted and how much freedom they were given in terms of ad-libbing or...
That was one of the notes I made as well, actually, because it has a sense of... If it was scripted, it was directed really well, because it felt naturalistic. The conversation, people spoke generally the way people do when they're speaking, rather than scripted. The
cadence was quite natural.
They overlap each other. The pacing was all right. It did feel like they had these characters and were just seeing where these characters went through the events.
I'm guessing maybe they had a loose script and were given a bit of freedom, because there were certain things, I read in the trivia, I can't remember which of the polls that it was, but whichever one of them, basically one of the first sort of big notable scares where one of the Pauls is filming and he sees somebody in one of the clown costumes, which we'll get to. Oh my God. This is why people have a fear of clowns. This film. Pennywise, move over.
The sole purpose, this film.
But he sort of sees somebody, assumes it's one of the other Pauls. I'm sticking with it. I'm committing.
I've got a list of all the names of the characters here, and I'm not going to tell you because I really like the idea of them all being Paul.
I still won't be able to differentiate. They could like, I don't know. It could have been Sarah for all I know at this point. But he thinks it's one of the others playing a prank, so he sort of goes back on himself, and then he sees the others in the other room, and he's just like, what the fuck? And then I think it's at that point where he sort of runs out again and ends up vomiting. That
no, so
or was that a different
there's
point?
So the vomiting scene is when the strobes are going off.
Is that earlier on?
And all of a sudden they see I think that's a bit. I can't remember. I don't know where they come in relation to each other.
Is that when they sort of isolate the footage and you see the brightly lit and there's sort of creepy people kind of approaching the camera in between? Yeah.
And then he freaks out, gets his other Paul to like unlock the door, and actually kind of runs off and then vomits.
That was it. But apparently that was completely organic. He threw up.
Yeah.
So.
I mean that is props to actual real life Paul.
I wonder why, because all the trivia said was that he actually ran out and threw up. That wasn't scripted, but I wonder if it was sensitivity to the strobe lights, or whether they genuinely did get freaked out, or I don't know. I want to know the reasons.
It's curious, isn't it? Yeah,
I thought that was interesting. But sort of going back to the dialogue and that being something that generally works in the film's favour. I think one of my major gripes with any sort of horror film, not just found footage, is characters get themselves in a situation and they come up with some absolutely tenuous reason to stay in the situation. Mm-hmm. And everybody at home is just like, fucking leave. Just you can get out at any point. Why are you putting yourself through this? Whereas this, that didn't bother me at all, because they had invested money in this. This is something that they took a lot of pride in and did year in, year out. So the reason that they didn't abandon the project felt real. It's felt
their livelihood.
Credible.
And not only that, there are characters who do try to leave and have to be convinced back. It was a neat thing. It was a small thing, but it just makes these characters feel believable because they react the way actually people would.
Yeah. It definitely added credibility to me.
Exactly. Going back to what you were saying about kind of the spooks, the earlier spooks, I am still trying to work out whether I think they showed their hand too early.
Do you think?
Because so up until the particular point I'm referring to is when there's a swish pan. They're upstairs in the bedrooms, I think. There's a swish pan, and then it cuts back to a figure, like a single frame of a figure having sort of being seen in that pan.
Yeah.
Now, that to me would. I mean, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, the first one I remember seeing is when actual Paul is doing one of his kind of monologues to camera. He's doing his Blair Witch bit, sort of video diary. And then you see somebody walk in the room behind him and he's just like, oh, what are you doing? Yeah. And then they leave. And he's just like, ugh, somebody's sleepwalking.
Yeah, you might be right, but I think those two are perhaps the two of the earlier ones we see.
Yeah.
And to me, and it's the same thing that actually House on Haunted Hill. I wish I saw more of in that.
Mm-hmm. The remake, you mean?
Yes, the 99 one. It never really gives the audience the chance to try to work out themselves whether it's someone pulling a prank or whether there's actually something spooky going on. Because, for example, in that swish pan, you know how like in the Babadook, there's often scenes where she thinks she sees the creature, the Babadook, and it just turns out to be a configuration of like hats and gloves or something and a coat.
Yeah, just a coat, yeah.
Yeah, like I think I would have liked that moment more if it had turned out that it was just a coincidence and they thought they saw a figure. But because between that and the kind of sleepwalking scene, you're almost primed to be like, oh, there is something fucked up there. And then you never really get the chance to question yourself whether it's someone pulling a prank or whether there's serious, supernatural stuff going on.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because this was the third watch of this film for me.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember how I felt about it the first time. I remember quite enjoying it the first time. I think, as with most found footage movies, they don't, to me personally, they don't necessarily stack up as well for rewatches. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that was something that I felt critical of the first time around, because I think perhaps I had just straight off the bat made the assumption that it was sort of spooky goings on. I definitely see what you're saying. I think if you maybe went in completely blind and I don't know, maybe there was this sort of like a Jacob's ladder, are they going crazy? Is it real sort of moment? But to me, I think I sort of just made the assumption straight off the bat that it was supernatural and just kind of went with it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, weirdly, not one of my complaints.
Of which there are many, I'm sure.
I mean, it just tickles me that you're the one criticising it. That's all I'm going to say.
No, this is the thing, because don't get me wrong, I really like this movie. I do. But I'm still trying to work out why. Because, like I said, there are things that I wish they'd have done better. There are things or differently. There are things, like I said, tropes that it falls into that it has no right to, considering how much discourse there is on what works in a found footage movie and what doesn't. I
mean, in terms of that, what I would counter with is that you like what you like. I often say, like, I like some tremendously terrible films, like just objectively awful, critically panned, dreck. So I think there can be a huge margin between what is good and what you enjoy.
Yeah,
but then you personally.
Yeah, what one enjoys.
Yeah,
but then it's well received. So
it is largely
they're doing something right.
Yeah,
and I think maybe it is. Maybe it's the construction of it, the way you piece the puzzles together. The authenticity of it. There is a lot going for it. But I think it's just something I would have liked to have seen more. I would have liked to see more interplay between the characters when they're trying to, the audience has less of an idea what's going on. But then, I kind of made a note about a Hitchcock theory called the bomb theory. You heard of that?
I haven't. Tell me more.
He's basically describing the difference between suspense and surprise. Okay. Now, if there are two characters sat opposite each other around a table, and there's a bomb under the table.
I have heard of this. Carry on.
Yeah. If the audience is made aware of this bomb, but the characters don't, that's suspense.
Yes.
If the audience is kept in the dark as well, that's surprise.
Right.
And I don't know which I would have preferred in this situation. Okay. Because part of it is about keeping you guessing. Like it seems set up to kind of create intrigue. You start off with this opening scene of supposedly a malfunction. Someone dies. There's panic. There's a lot of fear going on.
I mean, according to Wikipedia, about 14 people died. I don't remember that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A lot of people died, apparently.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Actually, I'm just reading the synopsis now. But you then are kind of drawn backwards through time and then piece that together as it goes.
Yeah.
Now, I would have thought that keeping the audience more in the dark would be the sensible thing to do there.
I agree with that.
But that said, I don't know whether that would have made it a better movie or not.
As a general rule, I completely agree with you. One thing a complaint that I generally have about monster movies or creature features, for example, is that they generally show too much too soon, and it strips away any atmosphere, any tension.
Yeah.
I think the unknown is scarier than the known.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But I think, I don't know, because I think maybe they did show their hand a little bit too soon. I think perhaps you're right, but because they escalated the scares and the weirdness, it didn't necessarily suffer too much for it.
I think that's right. I think you're right. Like it's not a short film by any means, but it's an hour and a half, so it's about an average film length. And when you're factoring in the interview footage, the documentary bits,
the preamble, yeah,
exactly. You've probably only got about an hour and a quarter of actual like horror footage to play with, and so I would imagine they wouldn't really have the runtime to play with that idea too much because they've spent that time establishing the documentary, for example.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Interesting.
So clowns.
Oh, okay.
I feel you have something you want to say about clowns.
Well, I am not generally susceptible to, is it coulrophobia?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Doesn't bother me. I'm not somebody who's, I don't really understand why it is such a prevalent fear. I don't get it. Clowns look like knobs.
I think it perhaps has something to do. I mean, the idea of like masks and stuff and
being able to hide who you are.
Kind of, it's all about hiding identity, but it also leans quite a lot into the uncanny valley. The idea of something seeming human, but just being slightly off, and just alerting that kind of, monkey bit of your brain that tells you something is up.
Lizard brains. Yeah,
exactly. Whichever animal brain it is, the primal bit that has all the instinct stuff. And that combined with the fact that clowns are meant to be light and fun and make you laugh. I think that's perhaps. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't really buy into it either. Okay. I don't think clowns overtly scare me that much, but I think that I can understand why.
All right. So with that in mind, with the fact that clowns don't generally scare you, how did you feel about the clowns in this film? Because, I mean, they're not real clowns. They are supposedly just props. They are dummies that are, life-size, and apparently the dummies didn't have enough weight to them, so when you see the clowns, there is one of the actors inside it, which I could tell, and I think that not spoiled it for me, but I think I would have liked to have seen a movie in which they actually had a mannequin that was able to, because then you can actually it comes down to you questioning yourself, because if you can say that looks like a person that has the right proportions, that has the right mass, because people are so good, and this is why the uncanny valley is such a thing. People see people every day. We know what a person looks like. You say that. I'm self-employed.
Not these days.
So, I'm self-employed in a pandemic. I don't see people most days. Cats, on the other hand.
We get
put
used.
A cat in a clown costume. That'd scare me.
Oh no, it would be adorable. But you become familiar with how a person looks, and I think if they'd have had a mannequin that was able to stand upright and actually be poseable and fill that role that they needed it to, I would have been really interested to see how that would have made a difference. Because then it comes down to you questioning, is that a person? Is that a supernatural entity? Is it something fucking with? There's more ambiguity there,
I do know, and I'm just keep talking. I'm just looking something up. Just out of interest, I really want to know how much money this film was made for.
Okay,
because I'm guessing budgetary constraints were a huge part of why there isn't there aren't any like sophisticated effects, but
well, and that goes for the props they use in the kind of haunted house itself, the actual props they use when they're setting it up.
Do you know what though? I think that added to it. And as somebody who's been to like quite a few sort of scare mazes and haunted house attractions, I don't know if America just has different standards, but that one looked pretty good to me. Like, I've been to some fucking ropey scare mazes.
I was actually, I think maybe it's perhaps something that really drew me to the film as a whole, is that just that whole like industry is fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something I've ever been a part of, but the idea of like, you could see the kind of like, how much they enjoyed the space they had and the actual joy of them working at what they wanted to go where. I just really enjoyed the way that was set up. And I think that's perhaps another reason I enjoyed it so much, because it's, as well as the horror, it's the fun of seeing people engaged in that industry being excited by it, you know.
Do you know what? I think I might have a new dream career.
Yeah.
How much fun would that be?
Right. So much fun. I would
Just
love
like
that.
Producing props and setting all that stuff up. That is a dream come true.
Yeah. I think that's part of the reason why I do like the film so much.
Yeah. I couldn't find any information about the budget, but I'm guessing it was very, very small.
It did seem it.
It did seem it, yeah. So on the subject of sort of real life horror Halloween attractions, I don't know which came first, but there was one in the US that became really infamous about a year or two ago called Mckamey Manor. I don't know if that's one you've heard of.
Yes, the guy who's like, there's like NDAs. You have to sign NDAs and just...
I think he's called Ross Mckamey.
I think that sounds about right.
He's a nutter. But yeah, like people were getting physically harmed, but because they like it wouldn't work in this country, I don't think, because outside of sort of professional fighting circles, you cannot legally consent to harm. It's not like there's no legal get out. Even if you sign the paperwork, you're still liable. You can't consent to harm. Or I guess maybe tattoos would be another way of getting around that.
You know, I know what you mean,
there are loopholes. But yeah, it wouldn't work in this country. So I kind of find it fascinating because it's so alien. Like, I've been to so many in this country and the actors aren't allowed to even breathe on you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's never any threat. You don't feel like you're in peril. And I just find myself laughing all the way through them because it's so unscary.
All right.
But like, part of me wonders whether I would do something like that.
Yeah. I don't think I would. For context, if anyone hasn't heard of it, there's this guy, Ross Mckamey, who has become infamous by setting up this kind of not really a haunted house experience, but he gets people to sign kind of a contract in which they consent to being put through a
torture,
effectively like, mental and physical torture,
literal torture. Yeah.
You know, they're supposed, there's rumors of there being a safe word that you can say to get out of it, but I've heard questions over whether he honors them or not. Yeah,
but I've heard stories about sort of people actually being physically injured, having their hair shaved off, that kind of thing, and just sort of, you know, sobbing and saying "let me out," and they're just like, the actors are just going with it. That's terrifying. Yeah. I wouldn't do that.
No.
I would never put myself through that. Maybe in my 20s when I was a bit more nihilistic. Not now. Not a chance.
But I think that's why things like these sort of things and roller coasters as well are particularly effective, because there is a sense of harm, but you know you're safe. You know, unless something goes drastically wrong, you are safe. And it's about kind of being close to that edge but not actually jumping is why they're perhaps so popular.
I I wish there was more of a culture of that sort of thing over here. Not like physical harm. I mean, like the haunted attraction thing.
Right, yeah.
Not the torture part.
But it's a good point to mention. I don't know if you saw, but the Abaddon Hotel is actually a haunted house experience in real life.
Is it?
Yeah.
But based on the movie? Based on the movie?
No. The actual the location is called the Haunting at the Waldorf Hotel.
Oh.
And they basically took over that and enlisted one of the women that works there as like a set designer.
Oh my god! I didn't know that.
Supposedly, yeah.
Is it still open?
That's what IMDb tells me.
Is it still open?
I was looking that up, and it does have a location on Google Maps.
Well, you know, I'm gonna insist on a Radio Gorepress holiday at some point.
It's in Layton, Pennsylvania. It's called the Waldorf Estate of Fear.
Oh hell yes!
Supposedly, which and I think that makes sense because obviously it's the idea of them actually having found a abandoned hotel and then getting permission to film in it, like of course it's a
budget that they must have had.
Yeah, of course it's somewhere that already exists, But then having that woman on set would then lend credence to the way they've designed it because all of a sudden it has a grounding in the way haunted houses tend to work.
I want to go.
But I think that makes sense because as much as I would have liked to have seen more of it explored, but you do get the sense there's like not a narrative per se, but a kind of a gradually rising tension because they talk about the finale being down in the basement where there's this where this woman sort of chained up and these clowns are all sort of lying on. It makes me wonder what the rest of the house is doing, how that kind of the rest of it is orchestrated.
Well, I didn't.
Cool to know.
I didn't expect to extend my bucket list this podcast, and yet here we are. I don't even like the film that much, but I still want to go.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. I've just going through my notes at the moment. There's plenty of.
Can I make a quick complaint then while you're checking your notes?
Go for it.
One complaint that I did have about actual Paul is because he's the first one who gets attacked. He doesn't get killed because he comes back, but he disappears for a little while after being attacked by some sort of ghost lady while he's playing peekaboo under his duvet. I firstly cheered when that happened because fuck that guy. But secondly, I felt like sort of doing that was kind of a mistake because him being the cameraman was what lent the whole let's film everything a bit more believability. And as soon as he was gone, they'd just be like, oh, fuck it. He was the one filming it. We can't be arsed now. In reality, why would they continue to film it with him gone?
I think that's fair, particularly if they are so stretched for getting it ready in time for Halloween. Yeah,
they were kind of stressed about the time frame they were on. So I thought that was a really curious choice.
Yeah, no. Well, I was going through one of the things I was going to say is how, again, a couple of weird choices they made, and mostly actually criticisms. As much as I love this movie, really like it. The idea of the basement camera being a blind spot. All of a sudden, the camera doesn't work down in the basement. Again, it's just our mobile. We don't have signal on our mobile phones. It's one of those. Yeah. It seems so kind of typical of films such as this, and I think there could have been better ways to actually. It's
a bit lazy.
Orchestrate that. For example, I was thinking about it. For example, in the mess on opening night, someone knocks the camera over or breaks it or something. And actually knocking it over would have been pretty neat because then all of a sudden it allows for things happening off screen. You get a sense of what's going on, but off screen because if the camera's been knocked down and it's pointing at a wall or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of get that. You can hear what's going on, but you have that added frustration, which adds to the experience because you want to see what's going on. And yeah, absolutely. Like, I always sort of lean on that moment in Green Room where Anton Yelchin has his hand out the door and you know something fucking horrible is happening and you can't see it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Until he
definitely.
pulls back his sort of floppy hand. But that sort of a moment, they could have utilised something like that.
Definitely, and that would have both kind of dealt with the idea of it being a blind spot, like it just happens to be the place where shit goes down is our only blind spot. And
Funny
also
that.
it just allows for more sort of opportunity for creativity.
Anything like that would make an audience go, oh, what a coincidence. Just come up with something more creative. It's not that difficult.
Exactly. There's a couple of weird editing choices. There's an odd moment where the camera's fucking up and you suddenly get this shot of, I think, Sarah in a field.
Oh, I didn't like that. That wouldn't happen. That's not what digital cameras do.
But then it has this weird like VHS look to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is a weird, I don't know why they did that, because I can see if it was a VHS and someone was rewinding and playing back and all of a sudden something is bleeding through that should have been written over. I can see that happening, but it's a digital camera. That's not how digital cameras work.
Yeah.
And particularly having a VHS look over it.
That's not how they glitch. That's not how they glitch. Unless this film was set further back than we think.
Exactly. Well, it was 2009, wasn't it?
Then no.
That's when it's set.
Unacceptable.
There's the moment where Sarah is doing Blair Witch and facing the wall.
Oh, she's much. They're doing they did the Twin Peaks sort of reversey talking.
Yeah,
I thought that was quite nice actually.
So I didn't, and that's only because I don't know if it's because
how the tables have turned.
Yeah, how the turntables. I don't know whether it's because it's so obviously David Lynch doing something like that is very clearly meant to be abstract. Set in, and it's a purposeful, like, this is fucked up, and it's clearly edited to make it seem odd. Whereas I feel this was done for a slightly different reason, and for that reason I don't think it worked quite as well. I guess the idea was just to make it seem like Sarah was kind of possessed or whatever reason. But the point is, you wouldn't have the video, you wouldn't have audio actually being reversed. You might speak backwards, for example. Maybe what should have happened is they played her speaking backwards to her and then she replicated that herself. Yeah. But because it's so obviously someone just reversing the audio in post, I just don't think that moment lands quite as well as it could have done.
Okay, so it's not the concept that you have issue with, it's the execution of it.
No, just the execution,
right. Okay, that's fair. I would agree with that because it's clearly a recording. It doesn't sound like a human talking. Yeah.
And I think I think they just could have done it a bit better.
Okay.
But, largely I think they nail, I guess this, unless you've got sort of anything else to say, I think it's a good time to kind of wrap up this episode.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think largely that, again, for all my criticism, I really enjoyed this movie. It's something I've shown to a bunch of people I know, and everyone has really enjoyed it as well.
Okay. Nothing?
No. It does a neat job of developing the mystery well, rather than just letting the events just play out as is. And I think the escalating tension really works, and seeing that opening footage recontextualized is really neat, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's that. I see who this person is now. Okay. I see what's going on here. I think the documentary is really authentic. I think it could have been handled a little better.
Okay.
But for the most part, really good. So yeah, I'd perhaps give this like a 8 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. I think that's
okay.
I really enjoyed it. It's not like perfect. I think there's room for improvement.
Yeah,
but it's definitely definitely above average,
Okay. Before I give my thoughts, what are your... would you put this in your favourite found footage movies list? Because you're quite a fan of the subgenre as a whole.
Yeah.
So what would feature on... give me a top 5, for example.
Oh, that's... put me on the spot.
I have.
The Last Exorcism is really good.
I haven't seen that in forever. Is it worth
I really enjoyed that
revisiting?
one. I think it could... That's one that really plays with the idea of... whether what's happening is real or not. Because you never really... Because the whole thing is misdirection. Like Father Cotton, I think his name is pretty out and out as a fraudster.
Okay.
He orchestrates exorcisms in the hopes of providing people peace. So he has good intentions, but his methodology is a bit suspect.
Right.
And so the whole thing is him getting that, trying to work out whether what's going on, this supposed possessed girl is truly possessed, or whether it's just him being, whether there's some, whether that's fraudulent as well.
Okay. I just remember a bit where they're being crouched on top of a wardrobe and it freaked me out a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really well done movie.
I love the fact that you're just like, well, I like it because of this and this, and I'm just like, oh, wardrobe. SARS. That says
what
it
else? What else? I need to think. How about you go through your notes, your roundup, and I'll think about other films.
Well, I can tell you about 1 or 2 found footage films that would be at the top of my list, if that helps.
Yeah.
Willow Creek would be right up there.
Of course. Yep. No. I am it's dumb of me to forget that one.
Well, it's funny because I was going to mention that in the first half of the show when you started talking about people who are good at their craft, knowing how to utilize the format to really good effect. And I think that is the perfect example. And I'm a big fan of Bobcat Goldthwait. I think he's got a really interesting, fucked up mind, and he's very funny, but he understands the sensibilities of classical filmmaking. So I think it just makes for really interesting work. And I think Willow Creek is perhaps I probably prefer World's Greatest Dad of his movies, but Willow Creek is just brilliant, I thought. And just the minimal cuts, like the likable characters, it was just so well done. Yeah,
that Willow Creek is a film that's enjoyable to watch regardless of what you're watching it for.
Yes.
I would quite happily watch those two goofing around for the entire movie.
Right? Give me like 4 hours of just their back and forth, right?
Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got the horror, which is perfect,
Bigfoot, cryptids, gimme. All of it is great. Another one, which I was sort of hesitant to call a found footage at first, because again, it's sort of a mock documentary. Digging Up the Marrow.
Yeah.
Which we've covered, so I'm not going to talk about it at length, but I think that's a really good one. I think it succeeds in being really funny, but also having really effectively scary moments. And it's just a really enjoyable film. I think that's a good example of it. Just something a bit different,
Yeah. No, I fully agree with those two.
However,
come on.
Now that I've delayed my final thoughts about Hell House LLC, it's fine.
You're entitled to... that's a valid... I can see why you would think it was fine.
4.5 out of 10. That's harsh, isn't it? 5 out of 10.
I'd still say it's harsh, but maybe that's just me.
I think I perhaps score films a little bit differently to you in that I maybe factor in rewatchability. And for me, I enjoyed it the first time I watched it, but I've now seen it 3 times and it's just like, it is what it is. I think everything you said is correct. I think they do what they do quite well. It just would not be my subgenre of choice ever.
That's fair.
if there was anything else available, it probably wouldn't be what I reached for.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Like, yeah.
I mean, it did. Like, yeah, I don't know. Fair play to them for forming a limited liability company, so they can just dissolve it after the fact and everything's fine.
There you go, job done.
Yeah. That's the epilogue that you don't see. That's the epilogue that you don't see.
The end. Oh no, there's another 2 movies after this.
I've seen the second one. I didn't enjoy the second one. I haven't seen the third.
Hell House 2, Abaddon Hotel, and
something
the third one
Ring of Fire. Right, Lake of Fire.
Ring of Fire. Just Johnny Cash for the entire movie.
I'd watch that. Johnny Cash being spooked in a haunted house. I'd be all over that.
Onto my list, since you mentioned it.
Carry on.
The Borderlands.
Ooh, all right, yeah. Okay, I'll give you that one. Borderlands is great.
And so good. I loved it. So claustrophobic as well.
Brilliant, yeah.
Troll Hunter is up there.
Troll Hunter. Okay.
I'm not sure it's like super favourite, but it's definitely notable.
I've seen it once and I enjoyed it, but I was distracted because one of the lead actors looks like a perfect amalgamation of Declan Donnelly and Ant McParlin.
Oh, now I need to rewatch it.
And it really fucked with my head. But otherwise, yeah.
The Tunnel is also really good.
The Tunnel, is that the Australian one?
Yeah.
Yes, I enjoyed that too.
When they're down in the sewers.
Again, it's one I've only seen once, but I do remember enjoying that. Is this just make Sarah into a massive liar segment?
You asked the question. I would have ended this episode by now, but you wanted to ask my favourite, and I listed ones that you really enjoy, so that's not me.
Yeah, apparently I'm all about fan footage now. Who knew?
Okay, I think that just about wraps up our episode. If you've enjoyed the episode, feel free to please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. We'd really appreciate it. And we have a new tier on our Patreon. We have for $2 for our $2 patrons, you can access all of our minisodes now.
Yeah,
so we've reduced our price.
It's the only
and join
tier.
Our Discord.
It's the only tier currently. So I've not been very active on Discord for this past week, but I'm going to rectify that, and you won't shut me up. I'll be shit posting memes before you know it. So it'd be cool to have you.
Wait.
And like Simpsons GIFs, no doubt, I'm sure. And yeah, you get a bonus episode every other week. Like,
yeah, and they're
what's
up to like an hour long, which is basically the length of this episode. So maybe that was a
it's
one-off.
getting to the point. No, I don't know. The past 2 have been like bumper episodes. It's getting to the point where you cannot shut us up, and maybe this is just like pandemic life now, because we talk to so many, we talk to fewer people. So when given the chance, it just so happens that we have microphones in front of us and you guys get the brunt of this. And I'm not even a little bit sorry.
But yeah, do check us out. We'd really appreciate it. But until next time, we'll catch you later.
Stay spooky.